Hi, this is Miss Lori. We're going to continue our lessons on understanding equivalent fractions. We've been working on fractions for a few days now. Let's recap some of the things that we know. We know about less than and greater than. We know that 1/3 is less than 2/3. We know that 5/6 is greater than 3/6. And we also know that 1 out of 1 is the same as 5/5, and that both of these are equivalent to 1 whole. So we know some things about equivalent fractions. We've used fraction strips to see the patterns with fractions. We've also looked at fractions on number lines. And again, we line the fractions up at a 0 point, and we compare them to a whole overall. So when I think about 1/2 of a fraction on a number line, I can see that it takes up half the distance of a whole. And when I compare that to 4ths and 8ths, I can see that the distance is the same, but the number of pieces, or in this case, the number of hops, changes. When I write equivalent fractions, I know that I write them to show that they are equal to each other. So those are some of the big ideas that we already know about equivalent fractions. Let's get to work doing equivalent fractions with fraction strips on Mathigon. So here is an example of your work. I'm going to post the teacher example for you to see, and the student work is here on the left. Now you'll notice that I did 1/2, but your work is going to be with 2/3. So let me demonstrate how to do that. First of all, I want you to notice that all of the fractions are lined up. They're lined up at the 0 point. So when we compare the fractions, I'm not going to just shift them around like this. They need to remain lined up so that I can compare them easily. Now let's focus on what I'm doing here. We're going to compare with 1/2. You're going to compare with 2/3. And when you're all done, you're going to tell me the pattern that the denominator shows you. I'm going to change my model so it's a 1/2. That's what I'm going to be working on. And I'm going to start here with thirds. And I have 3/3. I know that's the same as 1 whole. I'm going to subtract a third by clicking and dragging. And now I have 2/3. And 2/3 is greater than a 1/2. So I have not found an equivalent fraction. I'm going to subtract 1 more third. And now I have 1/3, and it shows that it's less than 1/2. So no matter what I do, I cannot make thirds equivalent to a 1/2. Well, I'm done thinking about thirds. I'm just going to set it aside. Now I'm going to move on to the next fraction bar. This fraction bar shows 4ths. 4 pieces make a whole. And I can see here that it looks like 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. Let me adjust my model to make sure it shows that. I'm going to subtract a 4th, and I have 3/4 left, and 3/4 is greater than a 1/2. Try one more, subtract another 4th, and look, 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. So I can come down here and I can include down here the teacher's model shows these fractions are equivalent. 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. And I probably have more fractions to include, so I'm going to include another equal sign just in case I need it. I'm going to move up the 5ths, and I'm going to predict that no, I cannot turn 5ths into an equivalent of a 1/2. It looks like that's not going to work, but I'm going to try it to make sure. So 5/5 minus 1/5, 4/5. 4/5 is greater than a 1/2. Subtract 1 more. 3/5 is greater than a 1/2. Subtract 1 more. Oh, 2/5 is less than a 1/2. So no matter what I do, I cannot make 5ths equivalent to a 1/2. So I'm done thinking about the 5ths. I'm going to set it aside. And the next one I'm going to do is 6ths. I move the 6th up. We start with a whole, 6 out of 6, subtract 1. 5/6 is greater than a 1/2. Subtract 1. 4/6 is greater than a 1/2. subtract 1. And 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2. That's great. We have found one more equivalent fraction to a half. So now I can say that 1/2, 2/4, and 3/6 are all equivalent fractions. They take up the same amount of space. So I come down here and I'm going to include the next equivalent fraction, 3/6. And now I'm going to try with 7s. I'm going to subtract 1 at a time. I can see that 7s is not going to make an equivalent fraction to a half. No matter what I do, 7s is just not going to become a half. So I need to put it aside and try the next one. 8 out of 8 is 1 whole. I'm going to subtract 1/8 at a time. There it is, another equivalent fraction. So 4/8 is equivalent to 3/6. And I'm seeing that pattern again, where the pieces are getting smaller, but there's more of them. Smaller pieces, but more of them. Smaller pieces, but more of them. Next, I need to go on and try with the 9s. But I think you understand the method. So now I want you to show equivalent fractions for 2/3. Please make sure that you type in your equivalent fractions down here, and then be sure to tell me what the denominators are skip counting by. And as a reminder, this is what your work page looks like. Please go to the link, do the work, and post it on the forum. And I look forward to seeing your work there. See you next time.